All right, Year 12 Global Politics. This is the final video in the series about global crises in relation to climate change. And in this video, I'm going to be focusing on the key aspects to the global crisis. So for climate change, well, I guess to start off with what key aspects are, they are what is unique to the global crisis. So that's why it varies between, climate change and terrorism. It's what makes this crisis unique. So we need to be talking about, and the only ones we're going to be talking about with climate change is resource exploitation, national interests, and methods of adapting to climate change and methods to reducing climate change. So those are our three key aspects. And what we're being asked here to do is to analyze the key aspect. So kind of put simply, based on last year's, the 2020 exam, you need to give, an explanation of what it means. Examples of what this looks like. And then how does it contribute? We also haven't seen this as a question, as an essay. So we could maybe see this as an essay question. It would be an interesting one to do. And if that was an essay, you really would have to emphasize how it contributes to the global crisis. So these are the key aspects we're going to be looking at. So let's get into it. The first key aspect is resource exploitation. So simply put, it's resources that can be mined, extracted, harvested from natural resources. These are resources which can't regenerate. So they're not sustainable, they're non-renewable, and once you use all of them up, it's gone. And since really the Industrial Revolution, we have been living in a time when we continue to take and take and take from the planet, and we continue to exploit these resources for our own gain, and we're forgetting the fact that then they won't be available for future generations. So really, we see these resources as necessary for economic growth. And if they're necessary for economic growth, we then aren't making them available for future generations, which isn't very good. So in terms of what it looks like, well, there's lots of different ways that we have resource. We have exploited the resources, and there was a few different examples in your book, but I am not bringing all of them up into this. I'm just going to focus on the ones that are probably easy to just explain. So we've seen this with deforestation. We keep cutting down trees like they're going to be there in the years to come, and they won't. If we cut down a tree, that's it. They're just going to be a stump. There's no growth. So if we continue to, use trees for logging and for agricultural gain, for factories, we're going to compound the effect of climate change. We're going to see an increase in the effects of climate change, because as we spoke about, in the first video about causes, forests are unique. They eat up the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So if we continue to exploit them, we're going to remove the carbon sinks, and that will make the issue of climate change worse. Also, we have petrol and gas. Every country pretty much uses them for economic gain, and these resources are extracted, and so once you use them all, there won't be anything left there. So how do does resource exploitation contribute to the issue of climate change? And this is really just one way of talking about it. When we're talking about mining, land clearing, and fracking, they are direct causes of climate change because they cause CO2 emissions to rise, which results in global warming. So if we continue to mine and do land clearing and fracking, we are going to then see an increase in fossil fuels. And this kind of go back to the causes video. So fossil fuels, equal, so plus this way will mean greenhouse gases, which will then lead to an increase in the temperature. So we would say here then that they are contributing to the cause. They will help cause climate change. We've got some good stats here as well that we can talk about. According to the UNEP report from 2017 to 2017, the annual global extraction of materials grew from 27 billion tons to 92 billion tons, and it makes up 50% of of the total greenhouse gas emissions. So yeah, they are, by extracting these goods, we've obviously seen an increase, which leads to greenhouse gas emissions, which then leads to an increase in the Earth's temperature. So by doing resource exploitation, it is helping cause climate change, as the way and the methods we go about getting these resources, it leads to an increase in the Earth's temperature because it means more greenhouse gases. Okay, so we have also national interests. National interests, as we spoke about as a challenge, is what's best for the state. Often states will just do what is in their short-term interests, and that is focusing on economic prosperity. So they then don't look to do anything about phasing out coal or moving towards renewables because they are focusing on their short-term interests. Okay, so how does this actually occur? In Australia, we've seen 26 to 28% reduction by 2030. However, according to current predictions, we're only going to make 16%. Now, we rely very heavily on fossil fuels and heavy mining industry. Australia in the mining industry, the mining industry delivers a 10% share of the Australian economy and is the largest contributor of GDP. This is all according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics. So it is not then in our national interest to limit the amount of coal that we are using. It's not in our interest to scale back on mining because it contributes such a huge amount to our economy. So in terms of how does the issue of national interest contribute to the issue of climate change? Well, it contributes to it because states are prioritizing their short-term gain of economic prosperity over the long-term interest of reducing carbon emissions to limit global warming to 2.5 degrees. So that is the problem there. Another country you could talk about here is China and their reliance on coal. If you want to go back to my previous video with responses, there's a whole section there on China's response, and they too are very heavily reliant on coal, so much so that they've been classified as being, I think they're considered as insufficient or highly insufficient according to the Climate Action Tracker, and that's really why their emissions have continued to grow, because they continue to rely on coal and are still establishing coal coal plants. So states continue to prioritize national interests because they want to see economic growth as opposed to decreasing the emissions that they have in the world. All right, our final key aspect. So we have mitigation and adaptation. So to explain what it means, mitigation means that we are taking action that will reduce climate change by addressing the causes. So we will do things such as, plant trees to address deforestation. We will, reduce our emissions by, reduce fossil fuels. So we are trying to reduce the causes of climate change. That's really what it's about there. Whereas adaptation is that, we've pretty much just accepted that this is the new normal. It's kind of like that meme. It's like, it is what it is. We've just given up. We have got climate change. We have to live with it. The only way we have to do with, we have to just move forward and let's just adapt to the new normal. So mitigation, we are trying to reduce the issue of climate change, whereas adaptation is about just saying it's the new normal, we have to accept it. So what are we going to do to adapt? So in terms of what it looks like, well, mitigation, it's about reducing the emissions. We may even try to then introduce renewable energy. We have seen this with China as the world's largest producer of wind and solar energy. They are trying to address the cause of climate change by using more renewable energy than fossil fuels. We've also seen with China, to address the cause of deforestation, they are planting 6 billion cubic meters. Might need to fact check myself, but of trees. So they're addressing the cause by planting more trees. Any country that has set a target to reduce emissions, Australia in the Paris Climate Agreement said 26 to 28%. China have in their 14th five-year plan have said an 18% reduction. So, there's states that are out there trying to mitigate. They're trying to address the cause, which is the causes of deforestation or the causes of more emissions in the world by introducing measures for that. Adaptation is about adapting, that we have accepted that this is what life is going to look like. So what can we do to adapt to it? We've seen this with countries building flood-resistant houses or early warning systems for cyclones. With Shanghai, they've already built 520 kilometers of sea walls to stop at the border to try and prevent rising sea levels. So, they've just accepted that flooding is part of their lives. So they have got something in place for that. They've just accepted that this is the way life is. In terms of how the mitigation and adaptation, link back to the crisis, I think what's good about this is it's actually a bit more of an uplifting key aspect because it's about solving the crisis. We've looked at national interests. That just makes it worse. We've looked at resource exploitation. That makes it worse. But adaptation and mitigation is about trying to solve the crisis, having strategies in place to make a difference. So, it's necessary to have these things because it is going to make a difference and hopefully stop the issue of climate change. So, what are 3 key aspects? Resource exploitation, national interests, methods of adapting to climate change and reducing climate change. And we have to be able to analyze. So explain what it means, have an example of it, and then link it back So how does this actually contribute to the issue of climate change? I hope this was helpful. I hope it was informative. If you have any questions, reach out, and thank you for listening to today's video. Bye.